Good evening and welcome to St. John in the Wilderness. Here we are right here in the church for another episode of Between the Trees. And we're doing things a little bit differently tonight. You might notice that George and I are not wearing masks. It feels actually very strange not to wear a mask. But the reason we're doing so is that we have a very kind parishioner who bought a big piece of plexiglass that is between George and me. So as we talk, hopefully we'll be able to hear each other, but we can take off the masks and still do it in a safe way. So George, it is so good to have you here. Thanks for agreeing to do this.
I look forward to it.
Yeah. So before we do a Between the Trees, we like to have like a 3 to 4 sentence autobiography that we ask people that we're going to interview to submit that so that we can give you a preview. And okay.
There we go.
We good?
We're good.
Okay, a little technical snafu. But we received a lot of information and some things that I didn't know all of that you had submitted. So, for people who are watching, just tell us a little bit about you. And we only have 25 minutes, and I have a lot of other things I want to ask you. So, tell us, where did you grow up? How did you find your way to Minnesota? What's your family like?
Well, I grew up in San Francisco. My parents were of Russian descent, or of Russian, period. So the first language I knew was Russian, and I didn't speak English until about 5 years old. And so we ate Russian candy, Russian church, Russian newspaper, Russian relatives, Russian church school, Russian language school. I might as well have been born in Russia. And so when I started in school is when you had to switch. You don't have a choice. We don't have Russian public school. And so I grew up in the city, and I like the city. It's a melting pot. Growing up, I had a variety of ethnic friends. Jews, Italians, Greeks, a bunch. It's a melting pot. And that's what I'm used to. And the expression colorblind, I think I consider myself colorblind in a positive sort of way. I see people as people.
So this was San Francisco in like the early 40s, late 30s?
Now
I don't want to
try to date me, but I'm going to try to skirt that a little bit. But yes, early 40s, during the war. We lived close to an army post, the Presidio, which was a strategic post, and we had air raids, and when we had to shutter the lights, and you had air raid curtains, blackout curtains, and a pile of sand in the basement that the CD, Civil Defense, would provide.
What was the sand for?
Well, I guess a fire. If you got bombed out, you need the sand to put out the fire.
Okay.
There were, to my knowledge, no air attacks, but there were Japanese submarines had been tangled in the net going into the Golden Gate, and so there have been several of those. And it was fun. It was during the war, and we played. You have guns and all kinds of kid stuff that kids play with. And
now, in what you had written, and we couldn't include it all, we had to condense it.
Yeah.
But what you wrote about, you talk about sneaking into the YMCA.
oh yeah, well the YMCA was strictly military. It was a military, thing. And if you had a green towel, if you could pinch a green towel, all the towels in the military were green. So if you pinched a green towel, then you could walk around with that towel, in the swimming pool and this and that.
Oh, that's like your card. Now they have like a card that they.
Well, yeah, back then they don't.
Yeah,
this was
towel.
an army. This was an army base.
Right. Okay.
And so, so we would sneak in and go swimming in the pool, and then you go upstairs and they have ping pong tables set up, and I kind of learned how to play ping pong against veterans who were recovering from injuries where they didn't have use of both arms. So they would serve the ping pong ball with one hand and
wow.
and do it. I mean, that's the way kind of how I serve too. When I have to play you, we haven't played yet.
Oh, I'll take you down, George.
You probably will. You probably will. But anyway, we'd play with them, and it was an interesting life. They had parade grounds. They had just miles of jeeps coming into the post. You had a very smart MP dressed up to the max, white hat, white leggings, and he would direct traffic right there, every which way.
Wow.
And it was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was fun.
So and then you went to college
And then I went to college. Yeah.
and you didn't go too far.
No, just across the bay. I mean, that was to me no big deal. I mean, nowadays people say Berkeley, wow, and it is kind of a wow now because with out-of-state tuition, 4 years of Berkeley would cost you $250,000, if not more.
Right.
I mean, so but back then school was cheap. I paid for a semester $37. My dad paid. I mean, I could have paid. I mean, just paper out money, you could almost pay for the tuition. But it was $37 a semester for as many credits as you can bear, and $200 a month, $200 for a semester, which is a half year, would cover room and board, where you had to work about 10 hours a week.
Right.
And that's where I got the idea about co-ops, by the way. Co-ops, there's 1,000, that co-op back then was 1,000 people involved in it for room and board, cooking, everything.
Yeah.
And only 10 employees. So the students provided the help.
Right. And you were part of that co-op.
Oh yeah. And I was the head waiter and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's also, was it Berkeley that you met Mary?
Well,
sort of.
It was right before. I mean, I was in Berkeley for the first year, and my aunt invited my dad, her brother, and bring along his son to meet the daughter of his friend.
Ah.
Okay, and Mary was, my impression of Russian women was, they had hair under their arms and they were muscular and, Olga from the Volga type of women. Well, Mary didn't fit that model at all.
Yeah.
She was quite attractive, and I mean, I was really smitten with her. And then I tried to show off a little bit because I was a radio ham. And so we'd take my car with the antenna on the back of it and stuff, and we go up to the top of a mountain. There was a mountain close by, Mount Diablo, where you get good reception.
Right.
You get the better reception.
Right.
So I was trying to wow her with my...
Did that work? Did that actually work?
Well, I don't know if it worked. I think the operative word in our relationship was tenacity. I mean, I a lot of stick-to-itiveness on my part, and I pursue it. She had a lot of suitors, but I mean, her vision. I mean, typical Russian boys would speak with thick accents and that kind of stuff, and I was kind of the, I didn't fit that mold. I wasn't your typical Russian boy.
Yeah.
So we were neither typical Russians, and she is just a nice mate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you dated all through Berkeley.
Yeah, we had mostly study dates.
Okay.
I mean, she is a
study dates and ham radio dates.
Okay, so I mean, I had classes during the day, and then I would pack lunch. I would pack a lunch, and I use that for dinner, so I can just study straight through. There's a fair amount of studying going on. $37 gets you in the front door, but there's no amount of money is going to guarantee you stay.
Right.
I mean, from then on, you've got to start swimming.
Got to make the grades, yeah.
And I mean, I think I was carrying typically 21 units. 21 units is a lot. I mean, that's a lot. I mean.
So then you were in school, and then and then how'd you get to Minnesota?
Well, IBM, after I graduated from college, I mean, I was offered a scholarship in the mechanical engineering department, which is strange for a double E. But I said, no, I want out. I just had enough of school. I bought myself, with my dad's help, with a down payment, a flashy Plymouth convertible. I mean, really, really flashy, nice Plymouth. Big fins. Back then it was a 57, and that was the year of the big fins. It was a nice convertible.
Those are beautiful cars.
And so then I went down to work for Motorola, and I worked for Motorola for 4 years. It was in Orange Grove in Riverside. And employees get to have access to that first row of oranges. Well, I mean, the first week we overdosed on oranges, and after a while you almost couldn't stand them. I mean, you'd get an orange that big, and it would be very mealy. So you don't want big oranges, you want juicy oranges. But that lasted for about 4 years. We're married, we moved down. I mean, I was down, Mary came down, and we had a wedding that was like, my aunt would say it's like a coronation. And it was pretty fancy-dancy wedding. It was a big, first of all, Orthodox churches, Russian Orthodox Church, is fancy to begin with. And the wedding is even fancier. I mean, we had no less than, I think, 2 or 3 priests officiating.
Wow.
I mean, it was a big-ass deal. And so then, in a big hotel, just sipping wine out of Mary's slipper, well, figuratively. And then we go to Motorola down to Riverside. One day honeymoon, and then we are back to shopping for that week. And you're buying a mop bucket, and you're doing this and that, and you have $2 for cigarettes. That would last you for a week.
And that was
$2 for a carton.
And that's still in California.
That was still in California, yeah.
Okay.
And then that went on for it was a great job, but it's a military job. And once the military kills you, doesn't kill you. The contract is over, or they cut it, or they have a peace thing going on and they cancel these big contracts. All of a sudden you've got a depression, and they lay off people left and right, and I had no job. And I consulted with the organ company for a while, and then quite by chance, then I moved up to San Francisco to live with. We had one child now, to live with in the city with my folks, and then I would commute in the morning to jobs. And this one job I mean, normally, you know, if you're doing that, you don't have to get up crack of dawn. I mean, you can get up maybe when you feel like it, and don't make the appointment too early. You know, you're kind of living
Right,
a life of luxury a little bit. But in this one case, this guy insisted that I be down there at 8 o'clock in the morning. Boom, 8 o'clock. God, 8 o'clock, I have to get up about 6 o'clock in the morning to beat the traffic, to drive down 60 miles.
Yeah.
This is to San Jose. And it was for Food Machinery was the name of the company. It's a reputable company that processed fruit, namely oranges, you know, processing oranges and that kind of stuff. But they had a lot of controls. And so, but after a few, I'm feeling pretty, you know, with 4 years of Motorola research and having just about a master's degree, virtually a master's degree, I felt pretty high on myself. And this pimply-faced kid was asking me these dumb questions. And I finally said, can I speak with somebody with more experience, a little bit more senior, so we could talk engineering type of thing, and I could tell you about my wares. But I said it probably in a not nice way. And about 15 minutes after 8, things started at 8. At 15 after 8, he says, I think we have nothing in common with you. Thank you very much. And so I drive. I mean, that's a long ways to drive down for a 15-minute, particularly that time of morning, appointment.
Right. Yeah.
And so I wanted to amortize the trip against at least another company. And I don't care what kind of company it was. I just wanted to say, well, at least I got two companies out of this thing. So I said, can you point me, I went to a gas station, can you point me to the closest non-military company around? And they said, sure, IBM, it's just straight down this road for about 5 miles, and you can't miss it on the right. So that's where I went. I didn't want the job, I just wanted to amortize the thing. So I go in. But it turned out they were very interested in me, and they kept on, you know, really, I didn't want to leave. And they said, oh, can you come back? The manager you want to speak to is not here, he's traveling, he'll be back on Monday. Can you come back in a couple days, you know, next Monday? I said, you know, yeah, okay. You know, I didn't mean to play it that far. Meanwhile, my dad is saying, oh, it's a great company, blue chip, blah, blah, blah. And they pursued me. They brought Mary down. They gave Mary the tour. They really did a full court press. And at the end, you know, I didn't know exactly what it was I would be doing, but they were certainly persistent, and I thought that bode well for them. So I took the job.
And you worked there for a little bit.
In San Jose, 2 years.
And then you moved over.
And then what happened was Rochester, which is a card plant, they build punch cards. They wanted to get into electronics, so they're trying to move our group, which was all electronics. They wanted to move us, a group like us, to seed electronics in Rochester. Up until then, it's strictly a mechanical machinery, nothing to do with electronics. And so we didn't know where the heck Rochester was. So, you know, you look in these dictionary encyclopedias that you get for $1 a week. You know, I don't know if you remember that, but as a promotion, the grocery store would offer every week, you know, first you get from A to B, and then from B to C, and so forth. So at the end of about a 15-week period, you have bought the whole thing. These are pretty cheap.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not the Encyclopedia Britannica. This is cheap, low.
Yeah.
So we looked up where Rochester was, and we saw a couple pictures. A picture of Mayo Clinic. We saw a Canadian goose, and it said what the annual snowfall was and where the average temperature was. We've never been in snow. I've never been in snow. Mary has never been in snow, to my knowledge. And so we said, well, why not? Why not try it? It turned out to be next to Canada. And so...
So you moved to Minnesota and you had 4 more kids.
No,
three more kids.
Georgia was born in California in Riverside. Jeannie was born shortly before we moved. She was born in San Jose, and then we moved. We had 2 kids, and IBM put us up in the motels there. And one of the women they were gathering, there was other women were there at the motel, and they said, "What is your husband? Is he a fellow?" And Mary says, "Of course he's a fellow. I mean, as opposed to what else would he be? And, well, a fellow is a Mayo fellow.
Right.
It's just, anyway, that was a funny thing. And there was the leaves. It was the autumn. It was in a fall where the leaves were just so billowy, nice piles of it. And I remember our kids would run and then jump in the leaves. And it was a good experience. And we were all by ourselves, no family. And it was about that time, I think Mary was probably pregnant with the 3rd child, that's Kiki. And, third child. Kiki.
I get mine mixed up too.
Yeah. Mary sometimes calls Gregory the dog, Gregory by the dog's name, and the dog by the Gregory's name.
Right.
They're both misbehaving. Yeah. And anyway,
so George, let me just ask you. So, one of the reasons that I wanted to. So, thanks. That's great to get all that background. One of the things I know about you, because you and I have known each other for a while, because George was also, when I was serving in a congregation in Wisconsin, George has a vacation home up there, their family does. And so that's where I got to know you first. So we've known each other for a while, and I've known you to be a passionate person. The reason I wanted to have you talk about this, because we're looking at discipleship, practice discipleship. And one of the things that I think is important for a disciple of Christ is, last week we looked at seeking, but also deciding, actually saying, you know what, I'm going to do it, and making decisions along the way. One of the things I know about you is that you wear a cross around, and can you tell me about that cross and why you wear it?
Well, and by the way, ironically, I don't have it. They took it off when I was having an operation, and somehow it got misplaced. I have spare cross, and I have to get a chain, so I don't have it now. Otherwise, I would show you. But I went to a Cresceo event. I have to back up and give you a little bit of background on this. We left the Greek church when our kids were getting so old that they would sit in the pews and be confronted with Greek, and they couldn't, they don't understand Greek. And so we started shopping around for an alternative church, and that's when we decided to go to Calvary Episcopal Church, which was 2 blocks away, and we had some dealings with Calvary before, and it just seemed like their service was very close. They had just changed the prayer book, and it seemed to follow 1 for 1 with the Greek one. Mm-hmm. And so we were very comfortable with the service. And this is because they would not do the service in English. They you're not going to do it in English. No Lord's Prayer in English. It was all 100% Greek. Well, so we switched churches, and so we went to Calvary, and guess what? They do the Lord's Prayer in English. They do the sermons in English, and everything else was in English.
Yes.
So that was great. That was great for our kids. It was great for us. But I noticed something among the people there. They were all seemed to be glowing and really high on something. And I don't know what, but it was very, very evident. And that is when I said, I don't know what these guys are drinking, but from what well are they drinking? But I'd like to drink from that same well. Well, that well turned out to be Cursillo, which is a love-in with Jesus. And it was a great experience. I've always been square with the Lord. I mean, square with the Lord for the most part, not for the most part. I was square with the Lord, period. But you know, I never had a close relationship with Jesus. I mean, my person of preference was God. You know, I talked to God. I still do talk to God, and I prayed to God in Russian, and if I wanted to get it up there for sure, sometimes I even slip back into Russian prayers. But these guys were drinking from something, and I wanted part of it, and it was Cursillo. And I started it. I mean, I started the weekend, and it started like ho-hum, a little bit ho-hum in the beginning, and it's pretty Spartan. You know, you sleep on the floor. You don't have to eat much. I mean, you don't eat very good food and things like that. But then as the weekend progressed, I noticed I'm getting sucked into this thing, and the more and more people are wearing a cross. And God, I wanted a cross in the worst way. I mean, I really wanted a cross, and I went to one of the guys and I said, "Where can I buy a cross like that?" And they said, "Oh, don't worry, you know," I forget what he said. He kind of dismissed it, and something to the effect like, "Don't worry, you know, we'll tell you where to get a cross or something." And that was the cross that at the end, in the closing ceremony, all the participants got this cross. And the cross said, "Christ is counting on you." And I've never been more spiritually high than that weekend. That was a spiritual high. I mean, you can be square with your Lord, you can go to church like that and things like that, but to taste the love of Jesus as it was evident at that weekend, it was overpowering. And so I very, very pleased to wear my cross. And on the first weekend, you know, I was out in the supermarket, and I was proudly, my cross was hanging, you know, like a priest almost. And one guy from IBM says, "Well, what do we call you?" And he says, "You can call me George." You know, like I'm wearing a cross. You know, like, do we call you Reverend or anything? Yeah. I said, "No, you call me George." But I think I leered in the supermarket. I'm wearing a cross, and I think I inappropriately leered at a good-looking woman. I forget exactly the circumstances, but then I look around and I say, "Oh, I hope nobody saw me," and I put the cross inside. I thought that's probably a safer spot for me, but I have never taken it off since then. And that's been that. Other than right now, I'm not wearing it, unfortunately, because I have to get a chain and stuff. But that was back in early 70s, so that would make it 30, 40, 50, about 50 years. And Christ is counting on you, and I took it literally, and I still do. Right. That's the thing that has been just really striking for me about you, which is that you do take that seriously, that statement that Christ is counting on you. And it wasn't just as powerful as Cursillo was. It wasn't a one-time thing for you. No. I mean, it is, what you have followed that up with is lots of decisions along the way where you've thought about Christ is counting on me, and then you make a decision. I mean, I have seen you do that. I am driven. I mean, I guess driven, you know, sometimes to the point of excess. You know, Mary will say, you know, you have a home here, you got kids at home here, you know, how about spending more time at home? And I say, yeah. But then I usually go back to my old ways, because I think, it's just the way we're called to do it, and I'm moved to do it. And you are one where it's not,
your faith is not just lived up in your head. I mean,
No, I'm not
it comes
cerebral.
out in
No.
your in action.
I know what I have to do. I don't have to read in the book to see, or in the Bible, to see what God has in plans for me. I know exactly what I'm supposed to do, and I think He put me exactly where He wants to put me. I mean, so I'm not cerebral. I mean, my son, his books, the spines on his books are all Bibles, are all broken and down and everything else. The spine on my Bible, if I could find it, looks like it's brand new. It hasn't been opened.
Yeah,
you know?
but you live out your faith in
Well,
a way
yeah, I
with
kind of
passion,
know
with
what
passion
I
and
kind
action.
of know what I have to do. I don't have to read the Bible. I think the Bible is a reference, but it's not. I don't treat it absolutely, because I think when you treat it absolutely, you get into trouble.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay. So we have, as you know, part of what we do here is we get questions from folks. They're going to
You didn't
come
ask
in.
me any embarrassing questions.
Well, I don't know. Sometimes they are kind of
No,
embarrassing.
you didn't ask me any
Oh,
embarrassing
no,
questions.
I know. I'll wait till we're in front.
All right, okay.
But after Between the Trees, we can do the embarrassing stuff. So, so the Wonder Stick will bring in some questions. There's another one that's coming in right now. And here we go. Thank you, Wonder Stick bearer. Okay. So here's one. This one may take a little while. So what was an important decision in your faith? Like in your life of faith, when did you have to make a decision and you really thought about that question, Christ is counting on me? Can you think of an example?
I'll tell you what, when Mary was pregnant with Georgie, our first son, we were in Riverside, and she was maybe 3 months along, something like that, 3 or 4 months along. And what happened was that she contracted German measles. And German measles was not a good thing to have when you're pregnant, because it very likely would cause a deformity in the kid, in the fetus, and it would be deformed, and it would be just bad news. And we were going, the doctor was a Catholic doctor, it was Catholic church, a Catholic hospital, and he said, well, I can't recommend termination. I can't do the termination. My faith doesn't allow me to do that, but I can recommend another doctor you can go to. And Mike, what are the alternatives? Well, the alternative was just to pray a lot. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I mean, I guess we didn't have a lot of discussion about that. We just started praying. And you pray for a good, healthy baby. And when Georgie was born, he had some issues. They had the transfuses. Mary had eclampsia toward the end there, and you had to do a blood transfusion right away. But we had a very competent doctor, and it happened. And we were blessed with our firstborn.
Yeah, that is a tough.
And I mean, he was just a great little guy, and he developed in a great little man, and a great father, and a husband, and brother, and just, it's your firstborn. And we were kind of young. I was young. And so we kind of grew up together. In engineering school, you don't know about how to be a parent. I mean, nobody tells you about that. And so you're kind of learning. How old was I? Maybe 22. 22 is kind of young, to be a dad.
Yeah.
And the kid's only a couple of years old, maybe. And so we kind of grew up together. They're like older brother, younger brother a little bit. And we'd go to the movies together, Dirty Harry movies Georgie and I used to go to, and we'd go to the fair together. And I mean, I miss them there terribly, but that was a very trying time. That's when we prayed a lot. That was the first thing. The second thing is when George, 43 years later, was diagnosed with a tumor, a brain tumor. And, I mean, first it was going to be okay. It wasn't a very aggressive one. It would just, have an operation every 3 years and take it out and snip it out. And it's just like, no big deal. But then that didn't last. Then it progressed. And we were praying for a cure, of course. You pray for you pray for a cure. I mean, you pray for a miracle. And, and he lived a 3 years, for 2 years maybe he lived. He had just moved up from Virginia, which is nice, which is ironic because now he's with us during this process. And we prayed, and he knew we were praying for him. I mean, of course he did. And he says, he was such a big believer, such a strong believer, that he says, either way, I win.
Wow.
I mean, that's a wow.
That is.
You see, yeah, that's a wow. And of course, the other 3 kids that followed him, I mean, he set the standard. And the kids were, our kids were such, no, we are just doubly blessed with all of our kids. Yeah. They're just super good kids, and they kind of followed after the first. The first one sets the tempo, and everybody kind of follows the same way. Yeah. And so we're just blessed with good fortune. And sometimes, you feel almost guilty when you see people that are hungry or poor or just somehow in trouble. And why is it that your life is so good, so nice, and so everything good? Why are they having so much trouble? Yeah. Why is it me?
Right.
Well,
right.
I don't know. That in a way that drives me to try to even the score, even the playing field between those that have and those that have not. Yeah. If you had to sum up my outreach efforts, it's trying to make it so that we all can enjoy. We don't have those that have and those that have not. We just kind of make it so we all share, because when one shares and the boats lift, all the boats go up, as the saying goes.
I know that your Bible, it doesn't have the crease down the back.
No, it does not.
What you just said is actually in the Bible. So, in different words, but exactly the same idea. It comes right out of the early church when they were sharing everything in the early church. So, okay, we only have about a minute left, George, so I want you to be able to plug something. What has been your most rewarding group or activity with this church at St. John's? And you only have 1 minute.
I enjoy all the people. I'm a people person. But I think probably the times that I particularly enjoy is cooking in the kitchen with like-minded individuals. When we tried to reproduce the agape meal, which is an amalgam of Russian and English and Greek traditions around Easter time.
Yeah.
We would put on a dinner, and it's the same group, but always just lovely people. They know who they are. We would get together and we would cook together and we pray together, and we sweat together, and that was a good experience. It's a good experience.
And I think that was like this last year because of COVID. That was the first year in a long time that we haven't done that.
Yes, that's true.
But we'll get back to it. We're not going to do it this year either, but because of COVID.
We started that tradition. I mean, I started that tradition back for Calvary. Calvary still does it. Every Easter they do it. Started the tradition in Stillwater, Ascension Church there.
Right.
I think, as far as I know, they still do that also.
Yeah.
And now we're doing it here. It's a good way of celebrating Easter.
We'll get back. And I know some of those people that you were cooking and praying and having fun with in the kitchen, and they are pretty excellent people.
Yeah.
So, George, thank you so much for being with us between the trees.
Thank you.
You're a super humble guy, but I am inspired by your life, the way that I'm not going to say how many years, you have been making decision after decision after decision, doing the very best you can.
Too many birthday candles.
To follow in the way of Christ,
Thank you.
I mean, I know you take your faith seriously, and what that cross isn't just a cross, it actually, you take that really seriously. So thank you for that.
Thank you, guys.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much for being with us. Next week, we'll actually have Sylvia Lovett here. We're going to be talking about praying. So seeking, we had that with Jeffrey Merrill, and deciding with George here. And then next week with Sylvia Lovett, we'll be praying. So thanks so much for joining us tonight. And do remember that also Sylvia is teaching the Bible study right now, which starts in like 3 minutes. So it's a different link on the website if you're looking at this live, and but probably by now you know where to go. So just check out the website. Again, George, thanks so much for being with us. God bless. Take care.